Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. We've got a lot of both reassuring and disturbing developments to cover today in the assault on American democracy. Also, some positive developments with UBI. Buckle up. Shout out to our Tier 3 patrons, Peter Park and Shay Meehan, as well as all our other patrons. You keep me going. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down the GOP's seditious lawsuit attempting to overrule the people's vote in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and Wisconsin, and giving the decision of who won to their Republican legislatures. A majority of the justices concluded that Texas lacked standing to even bring the case at all. As with almost every instance thus far, the courts found the lack of evidence for an attempt to overturn the will of the people to be insulting and degrading to the nation. Pennsylvania's Attorney General said of the decision, quote, "The U.S. Supreme Court saw through this seditious abuse of the judicial system, and its swift denial should make anyone contemplating further attacks on our election think twice. While these stunts are legally insignificant, their cost to our country in misleading the public about a free and fair election and tearing at our Constitution is high and will not be tolerated from our sister states or anyone else." End quote. Michigan's Attorney General said, quote, "Today's Supreme Court decision is an important reminder that we are a nation of laws, and though some may bend to the desire of a single individual, the courts will not." End quote. Well said. Over 100 Republican congressmen endorsed this legal attack on our democratic republic, and in response to their decision, Allen West, chair of the Texas Republican Party, said in a statement, quote, "Perhaps law-abiding states should bond together and form a union of states that will abide by the Constitution." End quote. So the Republican Party has now attacked the United States, and one of their highest-ranking members has floated the idea of seceding from the Union. Hard to know what to say at this point. Representative Bill Pascrell, on the other hand, is not at a loss for words. He has called for Pelosi to invoke the 14th Amendment, which states that those guilty of insurrection or rebellion cannot serve as congresspeople. He asks that Pelosi refuse to seat the 126 Republican representatives who signed onto the lawsuit. Quote, "I call on you to exercise the power of your offices to evaluate steps you can take to address these constitutional violations this Congress, and if possible, refuse to seat in the 117th Congress any members elect seeking to make Donald Trump an unelected dictator. Stated simply, men and women who would act to tear the United States government apart cannot serve as members of the Congress." End quote. I mean, I want to say this is crazy, but I can't. He's not wrong. These people are knowingly undermining the bedrock of American government. They are not fit to hold office, but it's clear that despite every election official and judge's word, a lot of Americans will refuse to see it that way. This will only inflame their delusions further. America is in a really bad place right now. Meanwhile, Trump rallies and BLM rallies have resumed clashing in Washington, D.C., where Trump supporters are chanting F Antifa and USA, while supporting a man who has done everything he possibly can to destroy the U.S. and its founding principles. De-radicalizing America is going to be a long, painful process. On stimulus, Senators Sanders and Hawley are saying they will not leave D.C. until stimulus checks are included in the relief bill. Hawley actually gave a pretty great speech on how direct relief is currently being treated as a last priority when it should be a first. You can check it out in the links below. CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jaime Dimon, also reiterated his support for stimulus checks as well as other cash grant and UBI adjacent policies, like baby bonds and the Earned Income Tax Credit. As you may recall, Dimon endorsed a negative income tax, which is essentially an income tax-funded UBI, months ago. While I don't really care what he thinks personally, I do know that people like him are the ones directing the conversation in government, so it's a pretty big deal to have someone like him on our side. What surprises me most is that the business elite are not all joining him. He recognizes that people need money to pay their debts to the bank. The whole economy needs people to have money, and there's no danger to providing that money from the Treasury right now. This should be obvious. The federal funding extension to prevent a shutdown for another week has passed the Senate, as did the military funding bill, by a veto-proof majority. They now go to Trump's desk. The Change.org petition for $2,000 per adult and $1,000 per child emergency UBI is almost at 2 million signatures. If you or anyone you know have not signed on yet, now's a good time. Link below. According to a new YouGov poll, 58% of Australians now support the implementation of a permanent UBI, with only 18% opposing the idea and the remainder neutral. 3 to 1 is a real good ratio for political policy. The sample size was 1,026 and support was even across all demographics, except for the elderly, where it was lower. In a sort of corollary to the basic income pilot for mothers in Mississippi, Mayors for a Guaranteed Income have announced that they will run a basic income pilot in Columbia, South Carolina for 100 fathers. It will provide $500 a month for 2 years, funded from part of Jack Dorsey's $15 million donation to the organization. The plan at the moment is to distribute the money via debit card and track how the money is used. Participants will be selected through the Midlands Fatherhood Coalition. This is in Santon's country, and he is serving on the task force. This brings the total of basic income pilots in operation or planned in the U.S. to 30. A new UBI documentary called Cost of Living will soon be rolling out on Amazon Prime. And finally, Jon Ossoff is running a new ad taking aim at his opponent for voting against stimulus checks and UI extension. It's a pretty perfect ad, in my opinion. The speaker is someone who a lot of Georgia Republicans will identify with, and the message is one that 90% of America will identify with. The only way it could be better is if Ossoff had promised to support robust stimulus checks and other relief in the ad himself, as we know he does. I'm increasingly impressed with Ossoff. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Bookmark and share the SCOTUS decision, Attorney General remarks, Dimon's endorsement of checks, the Australian UBI petition, and the Columbia pilot. Make sure you've signed the US UBI petition. Don't forget to put in your half hour a day of phone banking or text banking to support the efforts in Georgia. If you need help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, the Mission Asset Fund, or United Way. And don't forget to Yang Daily.